What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at y'all today with the next video in the NFL Draft Scouting Report series. So far, we have looked at Roschon Johnson, Mora Jomo, and Marvian Overshone. And today we will be looking at the senior interior defensive lineman, Keondre Coburn. So we're getting close to about halfway through the series now. It's been a week or two since I had uploaded the last part of it, but we'll get a little bit more rolling here with the combine not too far away. Same with Texas's pro day here, I believe, in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, talking about one of my favorite prospects in this draft class coming off the 40 acres. In case y'all aren't familiar with the format, kind of start by talking about the players' recruitment, their progression at Texas, what their career looked like in college. And then move on to talking about their strengths, weaknesses, and then their ultimate projection in the NFL draft. So kind of start back at the beginning here, kind of a brief overview of how Keondre Coburn ended up at Texas and what his path was like on the 40. So he was, he was a big human, as Texas staff likes to say for some of their guys in the trenches. He was around 6'1", 6'2", 330 pounds, four-star defensive lineman that signed with Texas's 2018 class. He was out of Houston Westfield High School. Had a plethora of offers, I believe, in the ballpark of 30 schools that offered him. And like I said, he was a guy that was big, looked physically ready to compete, really looked the part coming out of high school. In his first year at Texas, mind you, he signed with Texas when Tom Herman's regime was still on campus, and at the time, Todd Orlando was the defensive coordinator. So, the situation he started in was very different than the situation he ended up in, because I think it was three different defensive coordinators that Keondre played under at Texas between 2018 and 2022. During his true freshman campaign, he did get some work, finished the season with 2 combined tackles. I believe he was somewhere in the ballpark of like a couple dozen defensive snaps that he got during his first year on campus. So didn't get much run that year, but his sophomore campaign is where he really was able to contribute. He ended up kind of being in that starting rotation and showed a lot of flashes. Finished up that season a couple dozen tackles, around 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. It also was a pretty massive improvement grade-wise over his true freshman campaign. Finished up with 16 quarterback pressures, 13 defensive stops, and just 2 missed tackles. So he was pretty sound in multiple areas of his defensive game. At the time, again, we're looking at 2019 here, Coburn was mostly utilized as like a true nose tackle, which was the role that he played throughout most of his career at Texas. It really wasn't until this past season that that he was utilized more as like kind of a hybrid interior or like I guess like more of a versatile interior defensive lineman that could be moved to multiple different spots of the line pre-snap. He played multiple different techniques this past season, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. During his first few years on campus, nose tackle was pretty much his exclusive position. He showed some potential there. He was a good fit for that defense at the time, again, around 350 pounds at his max on campus. And he kind of hung around 340, 350 pounds, throughout his entire 5 years on the 40. And so, nose tackle wasn't really an issue for him if you're looking at the ability to like move bodies off the line of scrimmage. To fight off whether it be a single team against a more capable interior offensive lineman or a double team up the middle. He was really able to effectively take up space. And again, you saw those flashes during his sophomore campaign. His junior season, I think that was to date his most complete year. He really started to show the ability to not only get after the quarterback or at least like generate some pressure up the middle, but he was really becoming a force as a run stopper up the middle. I finished up the season with 15 defensive stops, well over half of which came in run defense, 10 quarterback pressures, so he had a slight dip from the previous season. but just 2 missed tackles as well. And he finished up the season with 25 combined tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and even had 2 batted balls. Actually, I think that was 3 if I'm looking at Texas's site. Let me confirm that here. Yeah, it's discrepancies between Sports Reference and Texas' actual athletic site. Apologize for that. But yeah, he in 2020, I think he continued to blossom just in terms of his consistency and his ability to make plays in multiple areas of the defense. Um, Unfortunately for him, though, as soon as he was kind of like really hitting his stride as an interior defensive lineman at Texas, you saw some coaching staff turnover. Um, Tom Herman was let go after the 2020 season. Steve Sarkisian comes aboard, brings in another defensive coordinator in Pete Kwiatkowski, which is the third defensive coordinator that Keondre had played under at the time. And from that point forward, it kind of hit the reset button for him where, he was on that upward trek. He was improving his defensive grade year over year. And like I said, you kind of saw him take a step back in 2021. He was asked to play a similar role positionally, but in terms of what he was asked to do was a little bit different because Pete Kwiatkowski likes to play, at its true form, more of a 2-4-5 defensive scheme. And in 2021, it was more of a variation of anywhere between 2 to 4 down linemen, depending on the linebacker set at the time. But 2021 was a rough year for the Texas defense. I think there were a lot of players that were miscast in their role. And there were certain linebackers and defensive linemen that were just kind of hung out to dry, where, especially some of the interior defensive linemen, guys like Keondre Coburn and T'Vondre Sweat, where, their main goal was really just to take up space to allow the linebackers to come up and clean up plays, especially in run defense. And, linebackers were often out of position. Defensive linemen didn't have a full understanding of the defense quite yet, or at least I don't think they had fully adapted. Again, still first year in the system, so still kind of learning that scheme. And it was inconsistent, a little bit of a mess in year one. And again, you saw that impact on Keondre where he played in 9 games. He did have some injury issues during the 2021 season. Still finished around 400 defensive snaps, which was kind of the mark he was around each year on campus, anywhere between like 380 to 450. But again, played in fewer games in total, finished up with 15 combined tackles, 10 fewer than the previous season, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and had a career low as a starting defensive lineman at Texas, just 3 quarterback pressures, 9 stops, and for the first time in his career had a double-digit missed tackle rate. So 2021, again, was kind of a step back for Keondre, and at the time, it really looked like his NFL draft stock was kind of getting thrown in flux a little bit, but he made a lot of the necessary strides, really got down, understood the defense, and was able to, kind of improve by leaps and bounds year over year from 2021 to 2022. His 2022 season was his most complete year at Texas, in my opinion, hands down. It was his highest defensive grade, his highest pass rush grade, second best run defense grade. And just all around, he was a force to be reckoned with in the middle in Texas's defense. I also think it was his most versatile season. He was playing anywhere between, he took some snaps as a nose tackle, but in 2022 at Texas, Byron Murphy was kind of the set in stone first team nose tackle at Texas. So guys like Keondre Coburn and Mora Jomo and T'Vondre Sweat, other interior defensive linemen, were really moved around to play more of the 3-tech interior defensive line positions. And in a number of different ways, Keondre Coburn was able to wreak havoc at the line of scrimmage for opposing teams and, really cause some disruptions in the backfield. This past season, statistically, it doesn't leap off the page at you much more than maybe 2019 or 2020, but the way that he was able to impact the entire defensive front is what I think the major takeaway is from his super senior campaign. He finishes up with around 30 combined tackles, 5 tackles for loss. I think it was 2.5 or 3 sacks. He did finish up with a career high 31 quarterback pressures. His previous career high was 16. And so in terms of his ability as a pass rusher up the middle, profound differences. We've covered that at the site all season long, that the way guys like Keondre Coburn and Moro Jomo and Devondre Sweat were able to wreak havoc up the middle was unmatched, I think, by any other team in the Big 12. This interior defensive line was special during the 2022 season. Coburn had, I think it was 6 or 7 games with at least 3 quarterback pressures. Yeah, it was 7. And so he really was a consistent force. It wasn't just that, he was having a few games where he was taking advantage of, maybe some advantageous matchups along the interior of the line. It really was a consistent thing where he was winning a lot of battles, where he was wreaking havoc up the middle and making life tough on opposing quarterbacks. But I'll digress on that subject because I could speak to his super senior campaign for a while. It was just tremendous to see the progressions he was able to make statistically and in terms of the overall impact on the team. So, I think this is a good transition point to start talking about some of his strengths. The strengths list, if you look at the screen here, is going to be it will be a lot longer than the weaknesses or questionable or just areas of improvement later in the video. I'll try to go through these pretty quickly since I talked about a lot of his game already. But, we're going to start here with a quick first step off the line of scrimmage. Keondre Coburn is a guy that is pretty fleet of foot for a defensive tackle or nose tackle that's 6'2", 350. He's always been pretty agile, and you can see that with the way he was used at Texas. Again, the way he was able to, kind of move over to some other defensive line spots pre-snap, whether that was like a 4-eye tech, a 3-tech. He was able to play the 0 technique. He played that throughout a lot of his career at Texas. He was really able to use that quick first step, that anticipation to get, to really get a leg up on opposing interior offensive linemen in his matchups or offensive tackles, depending on the technique he was playing. And so I think that's something that will translate really well to the next level. One other thing I wanted to mention here, he was actually used on quite a few goal line packages on offense. Sark and Longhorns like to use some of the bigger, this was mostly during the 2021 season, but got that some in 2022 as well. Yeah, he got 4 snaps as technically like a flex fullback out of the backfield, but just to add some size. And I believe that resulted in 2 or 3 rushing scores. And so, again, someone that's very fleet of foot and can be used in different ways. I'm not advocating for him being used as a fullback in the NFL, but it just goes to highlight what I'm talking about here. The next thing here is kind of the high motor, the nonstop energy that he brings every single down. You'll hear this a lot, that defensive linemen have a good motor, especially if they're fleet of foot. Coburn, it's a little bit different though, where when you watch his film, especially in run defense, you'll see that he never stops. He will do whatever it takes to be one of those guys getting hats to the football. And that's something that's extremely valuable, especially if you're, running with 2 or 3 bigger interior defensive linemen. You need people that are going to be able to cover a little bit more ground, have a little bit more chase down speed. And that is something that, again, along with that quick first step, in terms of his ability to just really wreak havoc and be disruptive up the middle, should translate to the next level right away. This feeds pretty nicely into my next point here with him, which is the strong base. He's able to get pretty good leverage. He's also pretty strong throughout his entire body. Again, he's 350 pounds, so very large human, but the core strength's good. The lower body strength is exceptional. Upper body strength's still pretty good too. He's able to shed blocks pretty quickly. He's got pretty good hands. I use the term pretty good with his hands and his leverage because I do think there's a little bit of refinement that can be used. And I'll talk about this later with the areas of improvement. But, at least in college, he was able to get good enough, get good enough pad level to be able to get the right approach and win a good portion of the matchups that he had. He had one of the 5 highest win rates among interior defensive linemen in pass rushing plays in the Big 12 this past season. So, that wasn't something that I believe that was the only season he ranked in the top 5 in the Big 12. So you can tell in terms of the improvement in, approach, fundamentals, pad level technique that, he really made some strides year over year. The next thing I wanted to mention here, and this is again all feeding into the same thing with his ability as a pass rusher and to be disruptive in this area. He's a pretty versatile pass rusher. I've mentioned this already, but he can be moved around to different spots along the interior defensive line. I had a post on the site earlier today, or on the Twitter page. I'll see if I can pull it up here because they were pretty intricate stats. But in the 3 tech, he ranks second among Big 12 defensive linemen in pressure rate. In the 1 tech, he tied for fifth. In the 2I tech, he also he was outright fifth. Again, this is pressure rate among interior defensive linemen in the Big 12. And then in plays where Texas had sent 3 or 4 pass rushers, he ranked in the top 3 among interior defensive linemen in the Big 12 in pressure rate as well. Kind of what all this says to me is it really speaks to his versatility in different personnel packages and different pre-snap alignments, different techniques along the defensive line to still be able to get ample pressure and consistently be able to be disruptive. A pretty easy takeaway here too is the fact that he's ranking top 3 among interior defensive linemen in the Big 12 in pressure rate when Texas is only sending 3 or 4 pass rushers. He had a pressure rate near 13% on plays where Texas only sent 3 pass rushers. That means that there might be a double team on the inside, but he's still finding a way to get that bull rush up the middle or make some move to the inside and get to the quarterback. So, I think that's something that's pretty special. And that, again, that type of scheme versatility along the interior defensive line is something that'll be valuable at the next level. A couple other quick points here that I wanted to make in terms of his just ability to be disruptive along the interior defensive line. He is a body mover. I mean, that's strong. I mentioned the strong base earlier, the 350-pound frame, pretty well distributed strength throughout his body, good balance as well. That really adds up to a defensive lineman that's able to move bodies. And is he going to be the most disruptive interior defensive lineman in this class? I don't think so. We'll mention a few of those reasons why a little bit later in the video, but I do think that it will be an above average skill for him in the grander scope of things in this NFL draft class. He moving the focus over to run defense. He's a really good run defender. I see a lot of scouting reports on him that do mention run defense as a plus for him. If I want to dig a little bit deeper here, he is a good read and react interior defensive lineman. He's able to find the ball quickly. Like I said, he's got pretty good hands. He's able to shed blocks fast. Combine that all with his quick first step, and he's someone that can really lead some charges to stop plays in the opposing team's backfield, or at least come up with the run stuff. Texas, I believe, ranked second in stuff rate in the Big 12 this past season, and Coburn's development was a big reason for that. The last thing here is that he's a consistent tackler. I mean, this is something that that can be mentioned in terms of his ability as a pass rusher or a run stopper. But he missed around 10% of his tackles, which is an above average missed tackle rate in the Big 12. And he was pretty consistent throughout his time at Texas. There was never a time where we were really talking about missed tackle after missed tackle for Keondre, or missed read after missed read. And so, again, anytime you've got someone that's a consistent tackler and that's able to find the ball quickly, obviously that's a great combination for someone that's going to be making consistent plays for you up the middle. And so, again, from those perspectives of solid technique, solid consistency, and solid production, Keondre is going to check a lot of the boxes there. Let's move over to the weaknesses now. There's a few that I have mentioned here. If you're looking at the screen, it's the weaknesses do put a cap on his ceiling, and I think that's a large reason why he's not going to be like a day 1 or a day 2 pick, most likely in this draft class. The first and most obvious weakness is going to be the length. He's got a below average wingspan. He stands about 6'2". A lot of the more compelling interior defensive line prospects in this draft class, and just in this day and age in professional football, are going to be up, north of 6'3" or 6'4". And so, again, just in terms of size and wingspan, Keondre is going to be a little bit limited in that regard. Another point here is that weight and over reliance on base power does limit his usage kind of outside of a handful of techniques as an interior defensive lineman. I think really the furthest out you probably want to send him is like a 4-eye technique. You know, anything beyond that is going to be a tough situation or going to be tough matchups for him to win. It's pretty much as simple as that, and that translates both in terms of run defense and pass rush situations. I think you want to keep him along the interior. That's where he will be most effective. And I've been mentioning and hinting at this last one here, or this last weakness or area of improvement here, but the limited length does put a ceiling on his overall ability. But one of the ways that you really like your interior defensive lineman to be disruptive is the ability to really get hands up in the passing lane. And Keondre did have one season where he got 3 batted balls. I believe that was 2020. And, a lot of those were a result of just him bull rushing up the middle and just having a good read on the ball. Again, sometimes I don't want to confuse his read and reactability and just his quick first step, where he was able to get his hand on the football a couple of times in one season with someone that, has a large wingspan, has good vertical ability, and is able to really get above opposing offensive linemen to get a hand in the way. And, like I said, some of these weaknesses are areas of improvement. I don't know how. I mean, at this point, he's 6'2". I don't think he's going to grow much more, and so it's something where these conversations, you kind of know what you're getting out of him, I guess is a good way to put it. And then if I'm looking at his NFL draft projection, there's kind of a decent range of projections for him on the third day of the NFL draft. For me, I've got him going around like the late 4th, early 5th round. I think there's a lot of teams out there that can use someone of his skill set where, if you kind of have a depth need along the interior defensive line, you need someone that's going to be able to come in and compete for some reps, to kind of bolster both your interior run defense and your interior pass rush. Coburn's, the guy for the job. And, I've mentioned this with a lot of Texas prospects in this class already, but maybe barring DeMarvion Overshone, but with guys like Rashawn Johnson, Mora Jomo, you largely know what you're getting out of them as prospects. And I think it's a similar situation with Coburn where, he's had an established track record. He was consistent year over year at Texas. And as long as he was cast in the right role, he was proficient throughout. So, I think there's an established floor for him. It's hard for me to see him going later than the 6th, but probably hard for me to see him going earlier than maybe the middle of the 4th. I could be wrong on that. If I am, I'm perfectly okay with that. I think Snacks is an awesome player, an awesome guy. I've loved being able to cover him for the last 4 or 5 years. So hopefully, he does kind of surpass even some of the more optimistic projections. But yeah, so that's pretty much it that I've got for the Keondre Coburn scouting report. We'll be back here in the next few days. We got a couple more defensive prospects to cover, and then we'll round out with some on the offensive side of the ball, Bijan being the highlight of the group. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Welcome.